Hi, I'm Gable, and in this video I'm going to be sharing my journey with astrology so far. I am currently studying to become an astrological advisor, and I wanted to share with you my journey from being casually, mildly interested in astrology to where I'm at now, which is wanting to pursue this full-time and knowing that this is my life's mission. My astrology journey began about 8 years ago with Jonathan Kainer's horoscopes in the newspaper. My family and I would read them for each of our sun signs, and we often found them accurate and interesting. One day, my mom asked the question that would end up changing my life. How are horoscopes made? The question intrigued me, but I didn't look into it until Jonathan Kainer's astrology column was taken over by his nephew after his death. And I wanted to see how easy would it be for me to make horoscopes for my family that were just as informative and accurate as Jonathan Kainer's. I was looking for fast, easy ways to get accurate astrological information for me and my family. So I just looked online for free horoscopes and little relatable pieces of information about the different sun signs. Over time, my interest in astrology slowly grew, and I started to memorize all the 12 different signs, the basic keywords associated with them, their symbols, their elements, their modalities, but I never really did anything with it, and I found it wasn't that useful. My mom, who had been mildly interested in astrology since before I was born, supported me in my interest and encouraged me to take it one step further. But at the time, I just wanted to keep it as a little hobby, a side interest, and I wasn't ready to get serious about it. But a few years later, I decided to take that next step and buy my first astrology book. That book was The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need by Joanna Martine Woolfolk. I read the whole thing and I was super excited. It was way more in-depth than anything I could find for free on the internet. It introduced me to the idea that there was more to astrology than just sun signs. The other planets, the aspects, and the houses added new layers of meaning to everything I had already learned. I think it was about 6 months after reading that book that I read my second astrology book, Charles E.O. Carter's Encyclopedia of Psychological Astrology. The encyclopedia was basically a walkthrough of the astrological indicators of different major personality traits and physical illnesses. I found the book fascinating and oftentimes very accurate. But what that book really taught me was that I wasn't finding what I was looking for in astrology. Whilst everything that I had read was endlessly fascinating to me, it wasn't practical. A lot of the things in the only astrology book you'll ever need were too vague to be useful. They were often things I already knew about myself or whoever's chart I was studying, and there wasn't anything I could do with that information. The Encyclopedia of Psychological Astrology was mind-blowing to me. But what was the use of knowing which planets were causing someone's insomnia when you didn't have any techniques to help them overcome it? It was seeming to me like birth charts were a very fatalistic way of looking at things. But when I dove deeper, I found that things only got more vague and less practical. I eventually got so discouraged that I gave up astrology altogether. So I went from being casually interested in astrology to knowing that it was a career path I was willing to pursue, to becoming a skeptic. I thought I had looked at everything, and that was just it. Astrology was just either vague or fatalistic or both. That you were born with a birth chart that told you who you were and what was going to happen to you, and there was no escape from that. There was nothing you could do about it. I am someone who lives for the idea of free will, and it was seeming like there was none of that in astrology. And so I gave it up for about a year. During that year, I felt very lost because I thought I had decided what it was that I wanted to do with my life, and then suddenly I didn't anymore. I tried to find new things that made me feel just as excited as astrology did, but nothing really fit. I had faith that I would find something again someday, but I was definite that I was not going to return to astrology again. Until I did. It was actually my mom that got me back into astrology. She had been supporting me the whole way through, encouraging me to keep going, to keep searching, and to keep trying. She got me to try making horoscopes, circling back to where it all started with the question of how horoscopes are made. I purchased Planets in Transit by Robert Hand and read the whole thing. I found the book very confusing, and I quickly realized that I had no idea what I was doing. But I kept practicing and became familiar with certain transits and how they expressed for us. But I was still not confident that I was doing it right. I tried looking for online courses on transits because I thought it would be helpful if I had someone who could tell me if I was doing it right or not. But they were very expensive, and at the time I didn't feel like investing in something that I wasn't even sure if I wanted to keep going with. Then my mom stumbled across Kevin Burk's website and his book, Principles of Practical Natal Astrology. She thought I should give it a read, and I didn't feel like it. But she finally convinced me to buy the book. As soon as I started reading Kevin Burk's Principles of Practical Natal Astrology, I knew I had found what I was looking for. The introduction to that book alone spoke to my soul. He acknowledged the fact that most astrology wasn't practical, and he addressed the fact that you could have been studying astrology for years and still not find anything you could actually use. His approach was focused entirely on using astrology in a practical way that you could actually use to improve your life. He cut out all the vague, overly optimistic parts of astrology so that it was something you could actually use. But even then, after reading the entire book and practicing the principles he taught in it, I still felt like I hadn't found what I was looking for yet. There were still no strategies on how to overcome these things, but I could see that his method was a lot more useful than any other method I had been exposed to so far. So I went to his website and found out that he was offering online courses. I signed up for the next one, and it was a lot. I remember him introducing a concept that I found very confronting at the time in the very first class, which was that astrology is not the answer. At the time, I didn't really understand what that meant, so it kind of scared me, but I quickly realized that that's exactly the same conclusion that I had come to when I decided to give up on astrology. That realization was that all the aspects, the planets, the asteroids, and all that didn't provide any useful information, let alone any techniques on how to overcome obstacles or challenges. The truth is that astrology is not the answer, but astrology, when used correctly, can help you find the answer. At the time, Kevin Burk was offering 8 different classes. There were 4 classes that built on each other that were designed for people who wanted to use astrology in their own lives, and the other 4 were training courses that built on each other that were for people who wanted to become professional astrologers. My plan was to take all 4 of those beginner classes 1 year, and then the next year take all the training classes. But after finishing the second of those beginner classes, Kevin Burk paused his program and went on a little break. During that break, I struggled a lot. He had reawakened my passion for astrology and reminded me that this is what I want to do with my life. So I desperately wanted to keep learning his methods so that I could start using them. But because all he had were the courses and those had been paused, and it's not like I could learn Kevin Burk astrology from anyone else, I started to feel lost. I kept studying with the information I already had, but I was feeling frustrated because my 2-year study plan had been interrupted, and I was starting to doubt if he was ever going to start up the courses again. After a few months, he finally announced that he was back and had taken some time to rethink what it was that he was teaching and reimagine it. And at this point, I was very frustrated because I was thinking, am I ever going to find the form of astrology that really works for me? And when I do, am I ever going to get to a point where I can actually use it to help people? It seemed like the day when I was going to finally be able to put these methods into practice with confidence was just getting further and further away. But when he finally released the new classes at the end of last year, I enrolled and started studying Astrology and the Human Game, which is what he is now calling his methods of astrology. Right now, as I'm filming this, I have just finished his Astrology and the Human Game Foundations class, which is the first step in his new program, and I am getting ready to enroll in the next step, Astrology and the Human Game Foundations Training. And I can tell you that this, Astrology and the Human Game, is really it. This fills in all the gaps that his previous course did not, and really speaks to me personally. I have finally found the form of astrology that is the most practical and that you can definitely use to improve your own life and, if you're interested, the lives of your clients. My plan now is to keep studying Kevin Burk's Astrology and the Human Game methods, and one day soon become an astrological advisor who uses these techniques to improve people's lives. If you want to know more about Kevin Burk's Astrology and the Human Game Foundations class, I will be sharing my experience with the course next Tuesday. So if you want to watch that video, be sure to subscribe so that you can get notified as soon as it gets released. Thank you so much for watching this video on my journey as an astrologer. I hope it has inspired you to keep learning, keep studying, and look into Kevin Burk's Astrology and the Human Game classes. I'd love for you to leave me a comment, let me know what you thought of this video, and also let me know what was your first astrology book that you read. And I hope to see you next week for my course review. See you then!